Hey everybody, Rose Matter here, and it has been a while since I've done a Rose Rambles episode, and I am excited to finally get to have the time to do one. For those of you who don't know what Rose Rambles is, it is a series where I pick a gaming topic, I sit down without a script in front of the camera, and I just ramble on about said topic. And as the title implies, today I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing games. And in my opinion, a disappointing game is almost worse than just a bad game because a disappointing game implies that you had some expectations about it being great, and then it just wasn't. Whether it is a sequel to a series that you love that just fell short, or it was a super hyped game that you just didn't understand what everybody was just raving about. I have a couple of those games on the list, and right off the bat, I will say some of the games that I have on my list might be controversial. They're very beloved games that a lot of people love, so I just ask, you may not agree with some of my choices, but I ask that you just respect my opinion. I will try my best to explain why these games fell short for me, but I've been talking long enough. Let's go ahead and let's jump into my most disappointing games. Alright, I want to start off a little less spicy and pick some games that I feel like pretty much across the board other people were disappointed by. And a lot of these are sequels. So the first one is maybe not a sequel, but like a reboot of a series that is very near and dear to my heart. And that game is Mass Effect Andromeda. I absolutely love the Mass Effect series, and the trilogy, in my opinion, is one of the best stories in video games. Yes, even people who have issues with the ending of Mass Effect 3, I did as well, but for the most part, I absolutely love those games. And I'm speaking as someone who's not really into sci-fi. There's just, man, something about that world, about the lore, and especially the characters of Mass Effect. I still love them all of these years later. So after Mass Effect 3, I was very excited to hear that they were going to be like rebooting the series, taking place in a new galaxy with a new protagonist and a new crew. And I figured, you know what, BioWare is amazing at creating great stories and very lovable and sympathetic and three-dimensional characters, and I'm sure I will love them just as much. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And I don't know why. I don't know what it was about Andromeda that just did not just appeal to me. I just did not latch on to it. This game came out in 2017, I think, and if you held a gun to my head and you asked me to give a rundown of the story, I would have a very hard time being able to tell you what actually happened in that game, despite the fact that I finished it. Something about you are in a ship that is looking for like worlds where you can set up a new colony. Your father dies at the beginning, so you have to take over as Ryder. And Ryder, as a protagonist, has not a tenth of an ounce of the charisma and gravitas that like Shepard had, especially female Shepard. And I understand Ryder is meant to be kind of like someone who's just thrown into a leadership role and they weren't expecting to, but I could not care less about Ryder. And the same goes for the story. Like I said, I don't remember much about the story. The villain, the villains in like the antagonists in the Mass Effect series are so good, and I can't remember who it was. I don't remember what their motivation was. It's like I played the whole game and it just like poof, as soon as I finished the game, all that was just gone from my mind. And unfortunately, the one saving grace I was hoping, the crewmates, are also just, in my opinion, completely lackluster and forgettable. So, like I said, this game came out in 2017, and the original ones came out at least like 2012, 2011 or earlier. And I haven't played those games since I first, finished those games way back when, like over 10 years ago. But I can still tell you all the names of the crew members. I can tell you a general backstory, their motivations, their loyalty missions, because I loved them so much. Even the ones that I didn't really care for some reason they still had an effect on me, and they were memorable. And whereas Andromeda, I finished it, like 5 years ago? And I can maybe, I'm really trying here. There was PB, the Asari. I just remember her because she had a funny name and she was like the quirky one. I think there was like the Turian. I think her name was Vetra. She was like supposed to be like the Garrus, the female Garrus. There's the humans, the girl with the short hair. I think her name started with a C, like Catherine or Colleen or something. And there was the British guy. And that's it. I don't remember much about them at all. I didn't really care about them. It was just, if I could just sum up Andromeda in one word, it was forgettable. And that's a word that you should never use to describe a Mass Effect game. And as for like the gameplay, the actual gameplay itself, it was okay. There was definitely improved driving, some like combat was improved. But another thing that really like killed it for me was just the monotony of the side missions and like the quests and everything. I just remember the like having to go between planets, and like a guy would give you a mission, you'd have to go to a planet and go do a thing and then go report back to him. I was like, okay, now go over to this planet and go do this, and then go talk to this guy over here and then come back to me. And it was just so tedious, and I hated doing them. It was like checking off like a grocery list. It was like an obligation to do it, but I didn't enjoy doing it. Whereas in the original Mass Effect games, even like these side quests that were given by inconsequential characters that you just meet out and about, they had their own little stories and they were interesting, and you wanted to complete those side quests because you wanted the resolution of what would happen. I just didn't feel it with this game. So unfortunately, I did finish it, but I didn't really enjoy my time with it. It was like maybe out of like some obligation because this was a Mass Effect game, and I'm like, I want to finish it. And I was also desperately hoping it would get better, and it just didn't. And I can't even tell you how the game ended. And it was just, it felt like such a waste of time and such a waste of a reboot. I have heard that BioWare, they are working on the next chapter in the Mass Effect series, and I'm really hoping that they're going to bring it this time, that they're going to knock it out of the park, because I love this series so much and I desperately want to fall in love with this series again. Alright, so moving on to another sequel in a game series that I really enjoy. Thankfully, this one wasn't as disappointing as Andromeda, but in my opinion, it did not live up to the previous games, and there's just something missing about it, and that is Fallout 4. Now, I am one of those, like, filthy casuals who I didn't start playing Fallout until Fallout 3. I never played the original, like, top-down games. And I really enjoyed Fallout 3, but the one that, like, really just chef's kiss was New Vegas. I loved New Vegas. It just felt like, I don't know, the writing was better in my opinion. The way that you could affect the world, the way that you could go about quests, and it just felt like you were creating, you were just given like a very basic character, and you could go out and you could do what you wanted. You could be as good or as bad as you wanted to be, and it really put like the role-playing in a role-playing game. And unfortunately for me, Fallout 4 just kind of missed the mark on that aspect. And the big thing I can pinpoint that I did not like about Fallout 4 was the dialogue tree, or the dialogue wheel, however you want to call it, because in Fallout 3, and especially New Vegas, you could basically create your character using their abilities, and it really felt like you were making your own tailored character, especially when it came to your charisma and your intelligence, and how that would apply to the world when you were speaking to people. Because I'm all about that. I love that kind of stuff. And if you, like, for example, made a low intelligent character, they would say really stupid, funny things, and the characters that you talk to would treat you like an idiot accordingly. Or if you had very good charisma, you could pass certain speech checks, and it might make certain quests easier to do. Or if you have low charisma, it'd make it more difficult. If you have like high medicine or high science, you could also apply that to speech checks, and you can go about quests in different ways. And I love a good speech check. I don't know what it is. I wish more games did that. And unfortunately with Fallout 4, you essentially get 4 options. You just have basically like a neutral response, a nice response, a sarcastic response, and that's kind of about it. I think it was because the protagonist is voice acted in Fallout 4, so unfortunately they had to cut down on the amount of like conversations that you could have, but that was to its detriment, in my opinion. I would gladly give up the protagonist being voiced if it meant that we got more, like, in-depth conversation options. And, like, not to say that the voice acting wasn't good, it is, and overall, like, the polish is there for the most part. It's Bethesda, of course, they're gonna have some, like, bugs and stuff here and there, but, like, the world looked nice, the voice acting was always good, but it felt like it was missing that, like, aspect of me, like, creating my own character and going out in the world and, like, playing the way I wanted to, and I think the fact the protagonist was voiced also kind of took away from that. It felt like you were almost making, or like you were playing as a pre-built character already. You didn't have much say in it. And that also applied to, like, the factions that you could join and the choices you could make. It just didn't feel like it had as much of an impact on the world as in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. It kind of felt like you were railroaded into playing, like, either, like, you're good or you're bad. There isn't that kind of, like, in-between. So I will say that unlike Andromeda, there were some characters and companions I actually really did enjoy. Actually, some of the ones in Fallout 4 are some of my favorites in the Fallout series. So I don't hate this game. I did finish it, and I enjoyed my time with it. But the big difference was, once I finished Fallout 4, unlike the other two games, I had no desire to go back and be like, alright, I'm gonna do a different build. I'm gonna put, like, my skills all in, like, charisma and intelligence, or maybe I'll do, like, a brute force, like, you know, one-handed behemoth who just, like, doesn't have, you know, high intelligence or whatever. Because it just didn't feel like it would play that differently. And that was the thing. It just, like, it did feel like it kind of took the role-playing aspect out of the RPG Fallout experience. So that was a little bit of a bummer, and unlike with BioWare, where I feel like they do have the chance to kind of redeem themselves with the next game, Bethesda has been just going on such a downward spiral that it really makes me nervous about the future games, not just the Fallout games, but the Elder Scroll games as well. So I feel like it almost, like, Fallout 4 is gonna be the last decent game in the series, and then it's just gonna go downhill, and that is such a bummer. But the great thing about you know, games like Fallout 3 New Vegas is you can mod them, and you can just kind of play the games in different ways, so at least I can go back and I can play those games again if I have to. But yeah, Fallout 4, not a bad game at all, but not as good as I was hoping it was going to be. Alright, so the next game is not a sequel for once. It was the start of a new series, and unfortunately I felt duped. I felt bamboozled by the marketing of this game, and I ended up with a game completely different from what I was expecting. And it's a little game called Dead Island. This game came out, I believe, in 2011, and I saw the trailer for this game. It came out of nowhere. I can't even remember, like, how I discovered it, but it is, in terms of telling a story, one of the best game trailers I've ever seen, and it just immediately made me like, I want to play this game. So if you haven't seen it, check out the first Dead Island trailer. It's amazing. It tells the story really quick of, like, a little zombified girl, and it goes backwards, and it shows, like, her falling out of a building, out of a window after attacking a man and attacking a woman, and then it does, like, goes back to what happened, which is this little girl who was attacked by zombies, turned into a zombie, killed her mother, and then attacked her father, who threw her out of the window. And it just tells, like, this tragic story in such a short amount of time. And you're like, wow, this is going to be like a zombie game, but it's going to have heart and story and emotion. And I love that. Like, I really like zombie media, but back in, like, 2011, this was before Telltale's The Walking Dead, I believe. So I was, like, really looking forward to that, and then I kind of forgot about the game. And then the game came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's that game with that amazing trailer. I should pick that up. Thankfully, I rented it. I at least had the thought to, like, just rent it and see, because I didn't look into the game after that. I didn't look into further information. Maybe that's on me, but I like to try and go into games without knowing too much about them. So the game that I ended up playing was very different than the game I thought I was going to get. So let me show you guys the, like, first couple of seconds that you see of this game when you boot it up. versus the trailer. So I'm just going to put them like one after the other, and you can kind of see the stark difference in terms of like the tone of the game. So here, you can see it for yourself.
I got a zombie army, and you can't harm me.
Hey, watch it.
You voodoo, bitch. Drink blood like a vampire without warning. Who do you voodoo, bitch? Stand up.
So it was a little jarring, but I was like, okay, that's okay. I'll just play it and see what happens, and you know, try not to judge it by the first like very opening. And unfortunately, it just ended up becoming like a standard running around, killing zombies, going on missions, collecting weapons, that kind of thing, which wasn't really the type of game that I was looking for. And it's not a bad game, I'm sure. I played maybe a couple of hours into it, and maybe it would have picked up, and maybe the story would have gotten better, but I was just not impressed by what I played. I thought it was going to be a much more story-driven game. So, once again, this is partially on me. The game itself, I'm sure there's like no issues with it. It was just what I saw in the trailer and what I was expecting from it was very different from what I got, and thus I was disappointed. So thankfully I did rent it, and I just learned my lesson about not always trusting a game trailer, especially if it doesn't have any like actual gameplay. So sometimes you just have to like do a little bit of research and just make sure that you know what you're getting into. Alright, so now we're going to be jumping back into sequels, and just like with the Fallout series and with the Mass Effect series, it was a sequel to a game series near and dear to my heart. Probably one of the game series that is like most just precious to me in terms of like I grew up with this series and I loved it so much, and then it just squashed like all of my enthusiasm for the series, which is pretty impressive for one game, and that is The Sims 4. I have been playing The Sims since it came out in like 2000. I just remember some of my fond memories of being like 10 years old at my friend's house in her dad's office, playing on that big bulky PC, The Sims 1, you know, because I didn't have a computer at home, and then getting The Sims 2 for my birthday and basically losing a year of my life to that game. I still love it. I still play it. Like, it still holds up, in my opinion. And then The Sims 3 barely being able to run on my laptop, but still playing it anyway and enjoying it. So of course I was like super hyped when The Sims 4 was announced, and they showed a trailer where they actually did show the Create a Sims. And it looked so good. I loved the style, the cartoony style, compared to The Sims 3, which I just really did not care for that plasticky, weird look of The Sims in 3, so I was very happy they were going back to like a cartoony style. And I was hyped. I was absolutely hyped. So of course I bought the game like day one, super excited. I started playing it and I was enjoying myself, but it felt like something was kind of missing. And the big thing is, I remember, was the big like hubbub about there were no toddlers and no pools, I believe, when The Sims 4 first came out. And that should have been like the first indication that like, ooh, it's sliding backwards. We're actually getting less than we were the previous games. And that is my big complaint about The Sims 4, is somehow it was more basic than the previous games. Like, it just... The Sims 3 had the big open world. The Sims 2, in my opinion, is like the most kind of complete in terms of like the base game. And The Sims 4 was missing like key elements, and this is when like the EA-ness really felt like it was rearing its ugly head. Was giving you a very basic experience, breaking off pieces of the game that I felt should have come with the base game, and then selling it back to you through expansion packs. And The Sims from the beginning, I mean, they like notorious for selling a million expansion packs, but in 4 it was just really, really kind of gross. How, like, literally you boot up The Sims 4 and the main screen is like showing you, buy this pack, this pack out now, and it just really felt like it lost its soul. I felt like ever since Max's sold to EA, that was when you really start to see it. But The Sims 4 was kind of like the amalgamation of all of it. And I lost my interest in it quite quickly, and I would have lost it even quicker if it wasn't for the amazing, like, mod community of The Sims. Like, that was the thing that kept me playing, was, like, people coming in and basically making the game what it should have been. And I feel like you can't really play The Sims without at least modding it a little bit. And I kind of dropped it. I bought a couple of expansion packs because I'm a clown, but I stopped playing it maybe less than a year after it came out. I'd come back every once in a while. I did a couple of videos for the channel when I first started, and those were fun, but like, you had to make your own fun. Like, I had to do challenges and stuff just to have some modicum of fun. So I feel like now if The Sims 5 was announced tomorrow, rather than being super excited about it, I would just be like so cynical. I would be like, okay, what are they going to take away in this one? What are they going to be breaking off and trying to sell back to you? What issues are there going to be? And that is a really heartbreaking thing to say about what was like my favorite game series growing up, but unfortunately the EA curse has just taken over The Sims, and I just can't feel myself get excited about it anymore, and that is just a real damn shame. Okay, so I went over the like less controversial ones, and now we're gonna be going into my hot takes, the spicy selections, the ones that I know I'm gonna get I'm gonna get some flack for. So we're just gonna go right into it. Let's start off with a game that it's frustrating to me because I feel like I should have loved it. And I can't even pinpoint, I can't tell you why. With everything else on this list, I can tell you why I found it disappointing. I can give you a clear-cut reason. This is the one game I'm like, I don't understand why I didn't like it. And that is Kingdom Hearts. Just Kingdom Hearts, the series in general. But let's talk specifically about the first one, because it's the only one that I actually played. And when I tell you I was hyped for this game, okay, I remember this was back in like the early 2000s, YouTube was not a thing, so when we wanted to see like trailers or things like that, we had to go on like Kazaa or LimeWire, and we had to download them. And I remember watching, I don't know if it was a trailer or if it was like the Japanese opening to Kingdom Hearts, but I must have watched that over at my friend's house. He and I were both so excited. I must have watched it with him over like 100 times. It was just like, the art style, the music, it looked beautiful, and I was so hyped for this game. I didn't know anything about this game other than like that opening. So when it finally came out, I went over to his place, and he loved it. Like, he played first, and then like I played some of it, and I just couldn't get into it. It wasn't connecting with me, and I don't know why. And I played it for a couple of hours. I think I made it to like Nightmare Town, Halloween Town, whatever that one is. So it was a little ways into the game, at least enough that I got the general idea of like what the game was all about. And for all intents and purposes, I should have loved it. Like that Disney and Final Fantasy like combination. The art style was beautiful. The music was gorgeous. It was like bright and cheery, but also kind of dark. And I don't know why, but I just didn't like it. And I'm still frustrated about that. I'm like, it feels like this game should have been made for me. I should have like obsessed over it and played all the games, and I just didn't. And I don't know if it was like the fighting, the battle thing or whatever, but for whatever reason, unfortunately, it just never connected with me. And it kind of feels like, to me, Kingdom Hearts feels kind of like Harry Potter. I was the right age for it. I was like 12 or 13 maybe when it came out. I loved the Final Fantasy games that I played. I loved Disney. I should have been all over it, but I wasn't. Just like with Harry Potter, when that came out, I was like a kid. I was right in that age. I loved to read. It's like a magical world. I should have connected with it. I should have loved it, but I didn't. And I felt like there was something wrong with me, just like with Kingdom Hearts. People love this series. And I'm just like, what am I missing? I don't know. Now, to be fair, it may have been for the best that I didn't end up super crazy about this game, because from what I know of the series, it just got very convoluted. The story just got, like, ridiculous. You had to play all the spin-off games on, like, the DS and all that stuff to be able to understand everything. So maybe it was for the best that I didn't get into it, but it is still one of those frustrating games where I'm like, it should have been a home run for me, and unfortunately it just wasn't, and I can't tell you why. So I understand you guys might be frustrated for me, like, not loving this game, and I am frustrated too, believe me. I feel like I really should have enjoyed it, and unfortunately I just didn't. But I will say, music kicks ass. I still listen to, like, Simple and Clean. Love that. I love that song. I love the music from Kingdom Hearts. So that's got that going for it, at least. Alright, so this next one, it feels like I'm committing a cardinal sin, you know, saying that I did not care for this game. I feel like I'm going to have to turn in, like, my gamer card. But I'm just going to say it. I did not care for The Witcher 3. I'm putting that out there in the world. Please don't click off, at least let me explain. I can say that this game, it is not the game's fault at all. I understand why people love this and they think it's one of the best games ever made. For me, a big issue was timing. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, this game came out, I believe, 2013. And it was a very tumultuous time in my life in terms of, like, there was a lot happening. So, I had just come off of, like, being done school, and during that time of school and living at home and, like, working minimal hours, so I had quite a bit of free time, I was playing Skyrim and I loved it. Like, I love Skyrim. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I had the time to put into it, so I was really able to immerse myself in that world. Now, by 2013, I had just moved out of my parents' place, moved in with my boyfriend, I finished school, I was starting, like, working full-time, so I had very minimal free time to commit myself to games. And that was about the time that The Witcher came out, The Witcher 3 came out. And I knew the hype. Everybody was just raving about this game, so I bought into it. I was like, okay, I love Skyrim, I love RPGs. I know it's the third in a series I've never played. I played, I think, 10 minutes of The Witcher 2 because it was free on Steam. Didn't care for it, but that's besides the point. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get this game, but I'm going to do my research because I don't want to go into this blind. And I watched videos, like hour-long essays and synopsis of, like, the Witcher world, so I would try and at least have, like, a general idea of what it was about. I was trying to give it a chance, you know? So, Witcher 3 comes out, I think, like, day 1 or 2. Like, I didn't just download off Steam. Like, I still have it. Like, I went to the game store and I bought a copy. I got, like, the deluxe edition because I was so sure I was gonna love this game. I'm like, yeah, I'll spend the extra money and, you know, get the extra content and stuff. Oh, what a waste of money. But, so, I started up the game, looked gorgeous. I was enjoying the first couple of hours. I was kind of getting an idea, like, alright, I get the general idea of what the Witcher world is all about and all that stuff. And then once the game opened up to me, something weird happened. It was a weird anxiety once I loaded up the map and I just saw how big the world was, and right off the bat how much there was to do. It's such a first world problem. It was too much choice. There was just, I didn't know where to start. The combat was, like, coming off of Skyrim, which is very simplistic. I know, I'm a filthy casual. I was enjoying, like, my very, like, casual fighting and magic thing from Skyrim. In The Witcher, you actually, like, gotta know what you're doing. You have to, like, be able to counter things and use your sigils, your magic, and you have to actually, like, have some skill, and I just wasn't getting the hang of it. There were so many collectibles, the menu, like, when I would see all the stuff I have, and, like, all these potions and things that you can mix together, I was just so overwhelmed. Like, the bestiary, like, all the beasts and the beast hunts, I'm like, oh my god, there's too much. There's too much, and I was stressing out about it. It feels so silly to say, but it was like some weird anxiety that I had about this game. It's not like I'm a newbie to open world games, but I think it was just my first big game when I was just, like, felt like I was an adult and I didn't have time to really dedicate myself to it. And I would have to force myself to be like, you gotta play The Witcher. You're gonna get to a point where it's gonna click. Like, you gotta give it a chance. Everybody talks about how good this game is. You have to, like, give it a try. And I really did. Like, I did, you know, some of the missions, what is the Bloody Baron, the one that everyone says is, like, one of the best side quests of all time. I did that one, and it was great. And I did a couple of other ones. But I still just, I wasn't connecting with it. I was still having that weird anxiety about like the world is too open. There's too much to do. I don't know what to do and where to go. And my friends were telling me like, okay, once you get to the big like hub, the big city hub, I think it's called like Novigrad, something like that. They're like, once you get there, it'll click. Like you'll get, you'll have like your hub, where it's like it's more condensed and stuff. So you'll probably feel better once you get there. And then I got there and the world opened up even more, like even just within the city, I'm like, there's so much to do. And that weird anxiety took hold of me again. And that's where I stopped. Once I got to the first big city, I just got this like weird, like paralyzing anxiety about playing. So I stopped playing. And here's the thing. I didn't just play this one time. I played it on 3 separate occasions. I really tried, guys. I really tried. And I would keep getting to the city, and that's where I would stop playing. And I don't know why. It was like this mental block that stopped me from wanting to progress. And I can't quite explain why that is. If I, won the lottery, or I suddenly like had all the free time in the world, I would consider going back and giving this a try. I feel like once I get to a certain point where it clicks and I understand the combat and I understand the magic and all that stuff, I am sure I would love it. And I've even looked up online if other people had the same feelings, and some people did, and they're like, yeah, there's just this moment where like all of a sudden I couldn't stop playing it, but unfortunately it didn't happen for me. So I don't even know if that makes sense, but it was just, yeah, like now I find as I'm older, especially starting this YouTube channel and having even less free time, I actually appreciate shorter games that I can finish in like 10 to 20 hours because it feels doable. I kind of shy away from the big games, which is a shame because they used to be like my favorite types of games, when I was in high school and I would have like my summers off and I could just dedicate myself to like 60+ hour games, and now I find those too daunting. And The Witcher 3 was kind of that first like feeling of that, just that weird anxiety of choice. So I actually mentioned this, if you guys want to check it out, I did a video years ago about games to help me with my anxiety, and I talk about this this freedom of choice and how it can be stressful to people with anxiety. So I think that is an aspect of it. So maybe I'll have it linked if you guys are interested, but I can say for certain with The Witcher 3 that Witcher 3, it's not you, it's me. Alright guys, so the last game on my list is, I think, going to be my most controversial one. I have mentioned it offhand here and there in videos that I didn't like this game, and I got shit for it. Because I know my audience, I know the type of games you guys like, because they're similar to the games I like, so please don't hate me too much for saying that I did not care for Persona 3. Let me explain. So, I love the Persona series, at least the games I've played. I have, like, the banner of my YouTube channel is me done in the style of, like, the Persona 5, like, all-out style, Like, I love these games, the ones I've played. I started with 4, I've played 5, I've played the spin-offs, but I haven't played the older games. So, I first started this series with Persona 4. I just decided to get it on a whim, and oh my gosh. I love Persona 4 so much. Like, it is top 5, if not top 3, favorite games of all time. So once I finished it, I knew I needed more of this series. So, of course, the most reasonable one would be to play Persona 3. So I downloaded it off of PlayStation Network, and I was like, sure, I was going to love it. Booted it up, and it definitely had a darker feel to it, which is okay. People have been with my channel. I appreciate some, dark shit. That's okay. Totally fine with me. Persona 4, very bright and cheery for the most part, but still had some dark aspects. But Persona 3 was just dark, 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 right from the beginning. And it definitely didn't start like as happy-go-lucky either. But that was okay. I was like, all right, give it a chance. You know what? The characters that were introduced, your party members, I wasn't crazy about them, but you know what? It took some time for Persona 4 as well. So I was willing to give it some time to, like, make me love these characters, because I was going to. Now, the problems started when I hit the first dungeon. So, the dungeon is called Tartarus, and if you don't know too much about the Persona games, so the dungeons are in 4 and 5 are very different from each other. They have a theme based on the person that they're based on. They tend to be quite colorful and symbolic and interesting to look at. They have puzzles, and they're just... Persona is one of those games where it makes me actually enjoy dungeon crawling and grinding, which normally it's my least favorite aspect of RPGs, but it somehow still makes it enjoyable. I think it's like the Persona fusions, like collecting the monsters and fusing them together. It makes you want to go out and fight the monsters. So I have to say I was a little put off when I first got to my first Persona 3 dungeon, which is Tartarus. It's just like this big, dark, dingy, uninteresting looking dungeon, and it's randomly generated as well, and you basically just run through these randomly generated floors. You just keep going up and up with the floors. And another thing that put me off was you can't control your party members. That was a big, like, wait, what? Like, that felt like going from 4 to 3, it felt like a step back. So I was like, okay, I'm not really a big fan of this, but it's okay. The dungeon crawling aspect is not even my favorite part of Persona games. Like, I love it's the outside of the dungeons, the social links, and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can deal with this. I'm not a big fan, but whatever. And so I kept playing, and the characters still just felt very boring to me. A lot of them were just very serious and not really interesting, but I was still trying to give them some time. So I beat the first boss, and I'm, going on with the social stuff. The part that broke me was when I had to go back to the dungeon, and I was like, okay, the first one, Tartarus, that was boring and dark looking, and I hated it, but that's okay. Maybe we'll find one that's more interesting. And then I ended up back, and it was Tartarus again. I'm like, wait a minute, is this the only dungeon for the whole game? So I looked it up, and it pretty much is. You just keep going up the floors in Tartarus, and it doesn't really change. And it was that moment that just kind of, like, broke me. I'm like, no, like, I know that the dungeon crawling is only a certain aspect, but, like, this game was just, it just felt like such a drag. It was just, like, the characters I wasn't connecting with, the dungeon crawling was so, like, dreary and boring. I couldn't control my party members, and it just felt like such a slog in comparison to Persona 4. Granted, Persona 4, definitely it has a slow start, but once it, like, kicks up, like, it's just go, 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 and it's fun, and this, it just felt like a chore. So I played up until, like, partially, I don't think I got to the second boss. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I almost got there. I definitely beat the first boss. So granted, I was, like, only 15 hours or so in, and I know for Persona, like, veterans, that is pathetic. I know you'd be like, the game hasn't even started at 15 hours. I know, believe me. I probably should have given it some more time, but just like with The Witcher, it was a matter of, like, it felt like I was forcing myself to keep playing, to try and find the moment where it clicked, to find the fun. And it just got to a point where I was like, how long do I have to play before I start to enjoy it, if I ever do? Is it going to be 20 hours? Is it going to be 30 hours? Is it going to be 40 hours? And I just decided it was just maybe not for me, and I stopped playing it. Granted, I have heard that the portable version fixes a lot of these issues, and it does introduce a female playable protagonist, which, Atlas, please, for your next game, please do that again. I would love to be able to have the option of play as female protagonist. That would be so cool. I really wish they would bring that back. But, I mean, the chances of me, like, getting a PSP or whatever, I could probably find a ROM of it somewhere and playing through it, probably pretty slim, because, like I said, it's a very long game, so it would be quite the time sink. So, unfortunately, Persona 4... I think it got my expectations way too high, and just maybe it was the tone and everything of Persona 3, just, it wasn't doing it for me. And if I played Persona 3 first, maybe I would have been okay with it, or maybe I would have just never finished Persona 3, and then I never would have found the other amazing games in the series. So, it's unfortunate, and I hope you guys can understand that it's just, like, these games are not for everybody, and maybe I should have given it more time, but it was just... it was just not for me. I don't know. So one thing I'll give Persona 3 credit for is the soundtrack is amazing. They always knock it out of the park with Persona soundtracks. To the point where I've played all of the Persona dancing spin-offs, and I actually have the special edition. This is the 3 and 5 dancing games. So it just goes to show you how much I do love Persona for the most part. Like, I never finished 3, but I still wanted to make sure that I got like the special edition with their music. And I prefer the music from 3 over 5. And that's not of any nostalgic love for the game. I just love the music objectively. So hopefully you guys won't hate me too much for this shocking confession, and hopefully you won't lose some respect for me. I desperately have to hope that someone in the comments agrees with me that maybe Persona 3 is not as good as everybody thinks, but I think I might be the only one who thinks that. Alright guys, so that will do it for my most disappointing games list. Hopefully you guys are not going to roast me too bad for my bad opinions, but hopefully I have explained why I didn't care for these games. And most of these games, they're not bad. Like I said, they're not bad, and some of them are even great, but they just didn't do it for me for whatever reason. So, of course, this is the part where I want to know what you guys think were your most disappointing games, and hopefully some people agree with me, at least with some of my choices. Please let me feel like I'm not the only one. I'd love to read them, so please leave them down below in the comments section. I hope you did enjoy this episode of Rose Rambles. And if you have any suggestions for future topics you would like for me to talk about in a Rose Rambles episode, you can leave those in the comments as well. I thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, bye.
Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Nana, Kaori Mikoto, Revealing Storm, Tequila Mockingbird, Jared Fan, Saya, Asborn Kennedy, Harry Gazif, Puncake G, iCognito, and Matt Goldsmith.